There are a whole bunch of pitchers. There are just a whole bunch of pitchers out there who could be the difference between making the postseason or not. So let's get to signing them already.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I have been a member of the Locked On Podcast Network for the last 6 years now, and we're getting ready. We're less than a month away from the first regular season game starting here. Well, let's just talk. We can follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, or whatever the hell Twitter is called now, or on Instagram. I am your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Please, if you're following us every single day and you leave a message, I don't know, somewhere, anywhere on the Twitterverse, then be sure to leave the hashtag EverydaySully so I know who's listening to us every single day. And today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Hey, let me pull back the curtain for a little bit. I almost read the wrong ad read right there. I almost said brought to you by FanDuel, and I almost read the Gametime one. So if there's a tiny bit of hesitation, it was me saying, whoops. Recording this late on the 27th day of February. You're probably going to see it on the 28th day. And that is not the last day of the month. My good friend Marcel, the Cubs fan with an 8, asked me if I'm going to be doing a show on leap year, because on the old Sully Baseball show, I used to say we do 365 episodes a year. Unless it's a leap year, then we're going to do another one. Well, I don't quite do 365 a year, but I do pretty close. And we are indeed going to be doing a leap year episode. We used to call that Sully Day on the Sully Baseball Daily Podcast. We've already got a bunch of people watching us on the YouTubes. Jeff Cohen, who is, I've been on his podcast. He's been on my podcast. Jeff, good to see you, buddy. You're an everyday Sully, and boy, don't I know it. And he's already asked me questions that are going to be relevant to today's show. But let's get to yesterday's trivia question, which, by the way, nobody got. Nobody got it. The question I asked was, who was the last pitcher to throw a complete game loss in the postseason? You know, the complete games are a thing of the dodo. The last time we had a complete game victory in the postseason was, I believe, in 2017, when Justin Verlander went the distance against the New York Yankees in that year that Yankee fans don't talk about. Last time there was a World Series complete game was the Game 2 of the 2015 World Series when Johnny Cueto threw a complete game victory for the Kansas City Royals. Well, people used to throw complete game losses as well. Kazi Shikamaru threw a guess. He said Chris Carpenter in the 2006 World Series. Not a bad guess. He was an ace during that period of time. The last time there was a complete game loss in the postseason, you have to go all the way back to 2016, when Toronto Blue Jays pitcher Marco Estrada went the distance of 8 innings, because they didn't play the bottom of the ninth, a complete game loss in Game 1 of the 2016 American League Championship Series between Cleveland and Toronto. Another interesting factoid was earlier that postseason, a pitcher threw a complete game loss for the San Francisco Giants in the division series against the Cubs. Do you know who that pitcher was? Johnny Cueto. Johnny Cueto threw back-to-back complete games in the postseason. Game 2 of the World Series in 2015 as a member of the Royals. He signed with the San Francisco Giants that offseason and threw a complete game loss in the opening game of the uh, division series, a 1-0 loss to the Chicago Cubs. By the way, another weird thing about that 2016 Giant team, they had a notoriously bad bullpen, and the first 2 games they pitched in that postseason, they didn't go to the bullpen at all. Madison Bumgarner threw a complete game shutout against the New York Mets in game 1 in the wild card game, and in game 1 against the Cubs, the Johnny Cueto held the Cubs to a single run, but that was enough for 1-0. By the way, in case you're wondering, who was the last pitcher to throw a complete game loss in the World Series? You have to go all the way back to 1992 when Tommy Glavine lost game 4 of the World Series to Toronto. He actually pitched 2 complete games in that year's World Series. Complete game victory in game 1, a complete game loss in game 4. Let me tell you how long ago that was. There were no Rockies. There were no Marlins. There were no Diamondbacks. There were no Rays. And the A's are considered a big budget team that signs a lot of free agents. Folks, it was a different time the last time we had a World Series complete game loss. All right. You go watch. By the way, I just want to just say a quick little locked on note. Lindsey Crosby is the wonderful host of the Locked On MLB Prospect Show, and we're saying goodbye to him. We're saying goodbye to him because he is leaving the Locked On MLB podcast show. He's a wonderful podcaster and a really good guy. He's been a guest on this show, and I've been a guest on his show. No doubt there will be a new host of the Locked On MLB Prospects show. But, Lindsey, we wish you best on all your endeavors, and you're always welcome back here to be a guest on the Locked On MLB podcast. All right. By the way, Steve Granado was also going to be leaving the Locked On Yankees show with Stacey Gotsulias. So Stacey's going to be flying solo again. Steve was a great co-host with Stacey for the time he was there, but he's heading off to other pastures as well. Steve and Stacey have been talking on Locked On Yankees. Follow their show. It's a terrific, terrific podcast. Where the Yankees have been playing footsie, it feels like since Tom Glavine threw that complete game loss in the 1992 World Series with Blake Snell. Snell is, of course, a perfect fit for the Yankees, I think. The Yankees I think they look good, but I think they're not quite there yet. I still think they're a mid-80s, low 90 win team. And Soto is a fabulous addition. And I think that, Soto's obviously gives the team a little more balance in their lineup, and they have the defending American League Cy Young Award winner, and having Blake Snell and Garrett Cole, both Cy Young Award winners, at the same time, something we haven't seen since Mark Davis and Brett Saberhagen were teammates with the 1990 Royals, is a no-brainer. By the way, they also made a very good move bringing in Caleb Ferguson, but it's been dragging on and on and on. Would you just sign him already? And there are other teams, like we've been reading that the Giants are kicking the tires on Blake Snell, and why not? Blake Snell pitched very, very well under Bob Melvin. Thank you very much. And winning a Cy Young Award with Bob Melvin, and Melvin's now the manager of the Giants. So why not bring him back over there? But there are other good quality pitchers, like Jeff Montgomery is still out there. It just available to be signed. Michael Lorenzen. I'm not saying Michael Lorenzen is the second coming of Grover Cleveland Alexander, okay? But he was someone who was an all-star last year. Granted, he was the Detroit Tigers all-star, and they need to have an all-star. But he pitched very well the first half of the season, was acquired by Philadelphia, and threw a freaking no-hitter. If you had told me when Lorenzen threw that no-hitter for Philadelphia after coming over as an all-star from Detroit, if you had told me that he would have gone to free agency that year and we would already be playing games and he wouldn't be signed. Otani would already be hitting home runs in spring training games, and he would still be, checking his LinkedIn page to try to see if anyone would hire him. I'm not saying again, I'm not saying he's a Cy Young contender, like Snell, but he certainly would be if you're looking to add an inexpensive 3 or 4 starter who's not going to cost you a prospect, is not going to cost you a draft pick, and is at this point is probably not going to cost you a long-term deal. So many teams are on the bubble of making the postseason, and we've seen what it means to be a wild card team that could stampede into the World Series like they have had for the last bunch of years, at least in the National League. Then what are we doing here? And we're going to take a long look at some of the players, some of these teams that could really. Oh, Jeff Cohen, by the way, thinks the Mets should sign Montgomery. Maybe you're right, but we're going to take a look at some of these teams and say, hey, what exactly are you doing not signing a player right now? Because a game here or there could be the difference between a trip to October or playing golf. It's time to talk about our friends from FanDuel. If you're unaware, if you've been watching this show, you probably already know this. But FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook, and the ideal place to go. Football's over, but basketball is in full swing. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your best shot. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the National Basketball Association. Hey, let's remind you that Locked On has begun the first ever live 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube for sports. And now it's available on the Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day. The local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channel app. We've seen this the last bunch of years. A game here or a game there is the difference between going to the postseason or not. When we've seen the Phillies make it to the World Series 2 years ago, and they finished one game ahead of the Milwaukee Brewers, who failed to make the postseason altogether. We saw how the Cubs were breathing down Arizona's neck, who backed into the playoffs, and then they wound up winning a pennant while the Cubs were playing tiddlywinks at home. Imagine filling a gap in your pitching staff here or there, a win in April or a win in June or a win in August. Hell, one more win in April, June, and August would have been the difference between the Brewers making the playoffs in 2022 and Chicago making the playoffs now. And so think about what it would mean to say, hey, let's fill a few gaps in. Let's get those wins earlier so we're not making up for lost time later. Now, I just mentioned that Blake Snell is a great fit for the New York Yankees. I absolutely think it is. It could be the difference between them making the playoffs or not, quite frankly. Because I do not think that they're going to be better than the Baltimore Orioles. I do think that the Yankees are they're a low 90, mid 80 win team. But the fact of the matter is, you put in a Snell there, and even if Snell isn't a Cy Young Award winner, an adequate Snell fills in some gaps. I think he could be the difference between making the postseason for the Giants or not. The Giants have Logan Webb. Okay. They have Kyle Harrison. They're going to be using Jordan Hicks. But Keaton Wynn, Tristan Beck, who are the other people who are going to be in there? Who are going to be the you can't miss people in that Giants rotation? Snell, get him in there. Or bring in Lorenzen. Or sign Montgomery. Or trade some of your pieces to bring in Dylan Cease. It makes sense for the Yankees. It makes sense for the Orioles. for the Giants, and really for the Orioles. Look at Kyle Bradish is a good pitcher, but he is coming back from a UCL strain. They brought in, uh, they brought in, they made the big trade with Milwaukee to bring in Burns. They have the likes of Dean Kremer. They have the likes of Grayson Rodriguez and Tyler Wells and Bruce Zimmerman. I mean, these are all pitchers they have. Um, and, Means doesn't look like he's ready. The fact of the matter is, if they bring in just one of those other pitchers to go alongside Burns, that could be the difference. That could be the difference big time. I'm really intrigued by the fact that the San Diego Padres, even though, you look at the Padres, that they could trade away Juan Soto and lose their borderline Hall of Fame manager in Bob Melvin and let the Cy Young Award winner walk and still have a shot at the postseason because they still have Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish, and they acquired Michael King. They still have Manny Machado. They still have Tatis Jr. They still have Xander Bogaerts. They still have a good team. And if you let Snell walk, but you bring in Lorenzen, and Lorenzen's essentially will be the number 4 starter. Trying to tell me that team can't win 84, 85 games? And then they're the teams, the Red Sox. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Red Sox in an episode. I have a special guest coming on to talk about the Red Sox. I'm one of the few people who's a Red Sox fan who isn't seeing doom and gloom about this Red Sox team. I don't think they're a pennant contender yet, but I like Brian Bello. Lucas Giolito, you don't know what you're going to get, but if you have a mediocre year from him, fine. Pivetta could be okay. Houck could be okay. Crawford could be okay. And you bring in another okay pitcher. Lorenzen seems like an ideal fit. Or, why not kick? They've been linked to Montgomery. If you always have an okay pitcher going, then I think they might do okay. The teams I'm really, really pushing hard on. I mean, the Mets obviously could do it, but, I'd say pump the brakes a little bit, Met fans, because the fact of the matter is, I think the Mets should rebuild. I've made this point before. I've made this point a couple of times. The city of New York hasn't had a championship parade in a generation. And the notion of New York fans won't accept the rebuild, I think, is complete nonsense. I think the Mets should rebuild. And if it takes another year or so and they'll have the team that's set up for the next generation or so, I think that is critical. So, I mean, if they bring in a Lorenzen or someone like that, it's not going to cost them much. That's one of the reasons why I think some of these teams should take advantage of it. And the 2 teams I think should really take advantage of, 3 teams really, are the teams that are really on the schneid with their fans. The Seattle Mariners barely missed the postseason last year after a 90-win team and making the playoffs a few years ago. And the Mariners remain the lone team to have never played in the World Series. And it is, again, they're close enough. All these teams are close enough to make the playoffs, and you roll the dice because you don't know what you're going to get. And all of a sudden you look up, it's like, hey, look, we don't have a bad rotation now. You give it your best shot. Then you have the Pirates. The Pirates just re-signed Mitch Keller, who's a good pitcher, to a long-term deal. They have Martin Perez. They have Marco Gonzalez. They have Yohan Oviedo, but he had surgery. Paul, is it? You may be witnessing history. I've not said his name. Is it Paul Skeens? He's the big first-round pick they made a couple of years ago. It's supposed to be the next great ace, and he's one of the top pitchers in, top prospects in baseball. Fantastic. Put a couple of veteran pitchers in there with him. These are teams that are desperate to finally turn things around for their fans. I would kick the tires again if they were the Twins too. Fill in those gaps. But the Reds, Pirates, the Mariners, these are all teams that a win or two is the difference between them making the playoffs, them changing the culture of the team, them selling lots of season tickets, them establishing that they're not also rans and bums. and you can bring in some quality pitchers for an affordable contract and run with it. Sign some of these pitchers. I'm tired of kicking the tires. I think I said this is at the time for Baltimore to go for the pennant. And if they can bring in one more good starting pitcher, great. And you know what? Also, quite frankly, there's so much good pitching on Arizona. Hell, bring in one more. Make it so that they're always throwing a top major league, a solid major league pitcher in the rotation. Maybe they'll head back to the World Series. A trade for Dylan Cease. We've demonstrated that bringing someone even like Corbin Burns isn't going to be necessarily all your top prospects. Let's go for it, folks. Remember what I'm saying now in February. We say it every year, and people seem to forget, especially at the end of the year when all these teams are scrambling to make up those extra couple of wins. Make them up now and get that rotation going, especially you teams that owe it to your fan base to put a potential pennant winner on the field. Some of you haven't done it in a very long time. And hey, if you start building up those great years and those great memories, people are going to want to buy some tickets, and they are going to use the Gametime app. Let me tell you, a pennant race is supposed to give you anxiety, not buying tickets to see the teams in the pennant race. Gametime is what you should use. Gametime is the fast and easiest way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from the seat, and the best price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And let me tell you something, that they are obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute deals. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concert, all the things. With zone deals, you pick the section you want to be in. Gametime picks the seats for big-time savings. And the Gametime guaranteed means you're always going to get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices. Do you know what they are? They're guaranteed. And also, it's time to remind you that Locked On has begun, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's available on the Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts on Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Okay, we're wrapping up today's show. Just sign those pitchers. Sign them now. Those are wins you don't need to get later. I don't know why I have to make this same statement every single year. Jeff Cohen is saying the Mets have good prospects coming up this and next season. I'm telling you, Jeff. You know, I'm telling you, Jeff, that the Mets are. Jeff Cohen's as big a Mets fan you're going to find on the planet. The Mets, if they build this team up with their prospects and everything, and let's say by 2025 or 2026, those prospects have become major league players, and then they can use their vast wealth to fill in the gaps. Then you have a solid built homegrown team that New York could fall in love with and be ready to go. Jeff did in another one of his posts says it doesn't make sense that the Yankees haven't signed him yet, which is one reason I think I think Snell is the odds-on favorite place for him to land, I think, is New York, the Yankees. But the fact that it's been such a no-brainer and it's taken this long is making me think that another team's going to swoop in and say, what do you want? I just think that's going to happen. Absolutely think that's going to happen. So we have a couple of really cool guests coming up on the show up this week, and our friend of the podcast, Javi Reyes, is going to stop by, and we are going to talk a little bit about the Padres and talk about the fact that could you lose an MVP candidate, a Cy Young winner, and a Manager of the Year candidate and get better? It's possible. It's absolutely possible, and the chances are San Diego, I think, will contend this year. We're going to see, and I like this guy Murphy, who's the manager of the squad. Wait, did I get No, he's not the manager. So what am I talking about? It's Schilt is the manager of the squad. Murphy's the manager of the Milwaukee Brewers, and I like Schilt as the manager of St. Louis. I was just blending, Brewers and Murphy used to be the manager of the Padres. The shell game of the managers, forgive me, it's nearly 10 o'clock at night here in California. Time to ask the trivia question. And bear with me for a second, because it's California related. It's actually related to the Angels, a team that I think just needs to take a good long look in the mirror. Watch them win the World Series this year. But they're a team that has to take a good long look in the mirror as Ron Washington is going to take the Ohtani-less Angels and see where they go. All right. I don't know much about WAR as a stat, but there are 4 Angels players in the history of their franchise who have reached 40 career WAR. 4 players. 2 of them do not have the last name of a fish. Who are the 2 Angels who have a 40 career WAR in their history with the Angels whose last name is not that of a fish? Tell me there, who the 2 non-fish Angels who reached 40 WAR. Put that down here in the comments. And if you're an Everyday Sully, make sure to put that hashtag Everyday Sully. So talking about the pitching market and why some of these teams get off the schneid. You're never going to get deals like this for pitchers who could be the difference between a playoff team and all the stuff that brings you and sitting at home. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.